You can make a very strong case that there's way too much MMA on TV these days, that we reached the oversaturation point long ago. But nights like tonight, November 4th, 2017, UFC 217, remind us why we fell in love with this sport in the first place, why we think that MMA is so special, why we keep covering it, why we keep coming back for more, why we enjoy watching what these men and women do inside the cage each and every week. One of the greatest nights in UFC history happened tonight. It happened inside the world's most famous arena, Madison Square Garden. We are going to attempt to recap it all here on the MMAfighting.com post-fight wrap-up show. Luckily enough, I'm here with both Marc Raimondi and Luke Thomas, who will help me put it all into words. Guys, what a night it was. 3 new champions. That's never happened before. George St-Pierre is the new UFC middleweight champion. Rose Namajunas is the new UFC women's strawweight champion. And TJ Dillashaw, once again, is the UFC bantamweight champion. Where do we start? Let me just ask you this. When I say UFC 217 and it's just a couple hours removed, what comes to mind? How do you put it into words?
I really think it's the greatest UFC fight card of all time. I really do. Sure that we're in the moment, and maybe a week or a month from now I'll remember something else that happened at another time, but I really feel like right now where we are, considering what happened and that George St. Pierre after 4 years is now the middleweight champion, it just seems so strange. I think this is it. I think this is the best one.
Luke, after Rose Namajunas became the strawweight champion, after she defeated Joanna in the first round, first person to ever beat Joanna in an MMA fight, I felt like I was exhausted. I was sitting next to you. Yeah. You said that you lost your voice. And then we had 2 other moments that would have been fine by themselves as a main event. Of those 3 moments, of those 3 title fights, which sticks out the most? What was the most sort of jaw-dropping?
Jaw-dropping would be the Joanna loss, because it'd be one thing if you said, well, I think Namajunas is going to win. Okay, MMA's crazy. Crazy things happen. But that she would bulldoze her in a round, that Joanna wouldn't even land hardly any punches on her, that she would just take it with ease, that she would beat back all the mind games, all the trash talk, get in there and just absolutely execute. And being that young and doing it was crazy. Now, look, Bisping going out on a shield in the way he did, incredible. TJ getting this insane moment of very needed redemption, in my view, huge. But the Joanna shock, is just too much to not rank number 1.
So, Marc, yesterday on the preview show, I asked you whether Joanna was kind of acting like Ronda Rousey pre-UFC 193, whether she was getting too emotional, whether she was trying to almost psych herself up, make this personal with Pat Barry and all this stuff and more. And then even at the press conference, she said, don't compare me to Ronda Rousey. She showed up, she answered all the questions. But I can't help but feel like she was trying to psych herself up. And every time one of her attempts to sort of, I don't know, get Rose off her game didn't work, it almost affected her, Joanna, more. Now in hindsight, was I onto something? Can you concede that maybe she was just a little bit off her game, that she was trying too hard?
I think that you may have been onto something, although I still don't think it was the exact same thing as the Rousey home weigh-in. But I think that there's a lesson here when you look at George St. Pierre, because he was the champion for 6 years, the welterweight champion. And he literally stepped away from the sport to not be the champion anymore because it just became too much pressure and just too much on his shoulders, and he dealt with it, sublimely for so long, but then it just became too much. And you have to wonder, and you have to really admire the people who could really hold that belt for a long time. And Joanna was had the chance to break tie Ronda Rousey's record tonight for most women's title defenses, and it's not easy to do that when there's just listen to George St. Pierre's interviews, when there's contender after contender after contender, and maybe there's some complacency, maybe just the pressure. I mean, we saw 3 champions lose their belts tonight, and Joanna was the longest tenured of those, and maybe it was just that. It's hard to keep getting up for all these contenders, and then maybe you were onto something, that she needed to do something for herself this week to get her going, to get the juices flowing.
Luke, especially in this new era, it seems like we're always trying to find the next big thing for the UFC, their next face. Unfortunately for them, Cody Garbrandt wasn't victorious, but we'll get to him in a second. Let me ask you about Rose. Does she have that in her? I mean, she's so honest when she talks about, her past, mental illness. We start to learn more about her, just little things like her playing the piano. I mean, she's just such a layered person. Yep. She's so likable. She's marketable. She's very nice to speak with. I mean, she's got the Thug Rose moniker. Do you feel like this could be one of those stars that the UFC really pushes?
You know what's funny? Joanna, I've said all the things that she said, I'm going to take your soul. That didn't turn out to be true, but I have to say, I really wonder if some of her criticisms of her, like, you're not really ready for this life. That may not be wrong, actually. Look, Joanna, she lost tonight, but she relished being a champion. She didn't mind doing the media. She didn't mind playing up for the crowds and getting into those antics. She really liked being in that role. And then Joe Rogan interviews Namajunas, and she's like, "Be a good person," because she's sweet and she's awesome. But it remains to be seen. It remains to be seen if those media demands and doing those press tours and talking to people in the way she has to and being out there and saying things to a crowd to be a person of the people, if she's really going to be able to do that. I do think you're right. She is layered. She's interesting. She's young, so she can really hold on to the belt for any kind of real period of time. There's really something there. But let's see if Joanna was right. Not everyone is suited for it. It can grind on you. Right. Big test for her.
Joanna said afterwards that had she won, her plan was to move up to 125 and fight the winner of the Ultimate Fighter. Of course, that didn't happen. We were asked on the MMA Beat just a couple of days ago, of the 3 champions going into 217, which one deserves an immediate rematch should they lose? We all said Joanna because she had been champion for the longest. Now that it happened, if you're the UFC, do you book the immediate rematch or do you do something else?
Yeah, I still think that you guys were correct when you said that. I think that if any one of the champions lost tonight, and they all did, Joanna would be the one to get that, at least is the most deserving, whatever that means, to get the immediate rematch. I don't know if they'll go in that direction. I mean, I still think that 125 is, even though she said a few minutes ago up here that now that she lost the belt, that's going to be her goal to get it back. But I still think that she should at least think about doing 125 because it seems like those weight cuts are getting harder. She came very late to weigh-ins. She was the last person to weigh in. She just made it on Friday, which seems like a very long time ago now. I think that's kind of grinding on her too, making those weight cuts. 125 would be easy. She even said at the press conference 135, so it makes me think that she's really not in love with this weight cut right now. So I think she should check it out. You know, let's see who wins the Ultimate Fighter. I'm not sure who that is. Obviously, the show's still going, and the finale is in December. And then go from there. Valentina Shevchenko wants to come down probably to 125 too. That's going to be a very interesting division. I would not be surprised if her next fight is at 125, despite what she said today.
2 undefeated champions lose their belt tonight. Joanna Jędrzejczyk and Cody Garbrandt. I mean, it's shocking stuff.
Crazy.
This is unprecedented stuff.
Via stoppage.
Yes, via stoppage. What did you make of TJ Dillashaw's performance? Because early on it seemed like Cody was getting the better of him, and then somehow he was able to turn the tables.
And look, if this had been a pride fight, you could have argued that Cody would have kept his title. I mean, when he knocked him down, I went back and watched the replay. He hit him with a clean right, and then the first shot he threw on the ground, that also landed clean, and you could see Dillashaw trying to get himself up. He was struggling, so you really wonder what could have happened there. Here's what I have to say about it. Like, Cody Garbrandt is instinctually, he makes better athletic decisions, although TJ's obviously a very good athlete. TJ just works on trickery, and I don't mean this in a disparaging way, I mean it's at the highest level, trickery and looks and feints and deception and all different kinds of end arounds. That's what he's really worked on. That's a vision he's had for himself that Duane Ludwig has helped brought to bear. The reason why this victory to me is so amazing is because the reason he left Team Alpha Male was to pursue a vision of himself that he wanted to seek through. Duane Ludwig and everyone else helped him get there, and he used that to beat the Golden Boy from Team Alpha Male. Whoa, that is a massive, massive victory for him. Not as shocking as we mentioned for the one for Joanna, but you want to talk about a guy who reclaimed not merely the title, but I think in some ways control of the story, maybe even the moral authority in this whole one. Incredible win for him.
He really does get to do, he gets to sort of set the tone now, especially considering all the crap they threw his way with all the accusations. And let's give TJ Dillashaw some credit. I mean, he really had, he never went lower, right? He never tried to, not stoop to their level, I don't want to say that, but he never tried to go tit for tat with them. Even, you know, with the footage coming out this week, he kind of all took it in stride, and I have to give him credit for that. So he wins, and then afterwards he says, Demetrius Johnson, your record is fake. It's padded. I mean, we've never had someone at this level go after DJ like that. Yeah. And I mean, he makes a damn good point, and like, you know, like he brings a really good case to the table. And also, what's interesting is there's no one right now for DJ. Like, there's literally no one. Maybe Pettis if he beats Cejudo, but nothing that would be as intriguing as a champion versus champion fight. Clearly, Dana White is interested in it. He wanted to book it prior to the Borg fight. If you're the UFC, do you finally try to make this fight happen? DJ versus TJ for the flyweight title, because that's what Dillashaw wants to do.
It's so tempting, and it's a fight that I think that on paper everyone wants to see. I mean, that it would be a phenomenal fight, but I just have reservations still, and I've been saying this since that whole topic was brought up over the summer, even before that, about the weight cut. I mean, that really is, I mean, Dillashaw did say that he puts on muscle to try to maintain, the bantamweight division, and he would actually be smaller if he didn't do that. But I think that's probably most people in the bantamweight division. He said he walks around at 150 pounds, which to me, I mean, are there flyweights cutting down from 150? Certainly there are, but that's a good amount of your body percentage, your body mass percentage that you're dropping. It wouldn't fly in California. They would, if someone was to cut that amount, they would move you up for the next fight. So I don't know. I mean, I think that, if he wants to really change his lifestyle and try to do it the right way, it would take some time, and we wouldn't be talking about this fight for another 6 to 8 months. That's a possibility. Would I love to see the fight? Of course, but we've had so many things happen with the early weigh-ins. The last thing you really want is going into a fight week between those guys, wondering more about, can he make the weight? Will he make the weigh-ins? Will the fight get called off? More than the actual, just the greatness of how that fight could be.
Right. Maybe the answer is 130, although then the belt isn't on the line. By the way, you were at that press conference a couple of days ago, the body armor one. Cody was there with the belt. How big of a blow is this to the company? Because it really, even Dana White going out of his way a month ago on the Dan Lebertard show to say this was the future. He's the guy. Cody No Love, he called him. How big of a blow is this to the company?
Yeah, I mean, it's a short-term blow. I think that Garbrandt is still young. I think he'll get another shot at it. Still has a chance, but I said it yesterday. If he won this fight, you strap the rocket pack to his back, and obviously that can't happen now.
Yeah. I also remember saying yesterday that I have a feeling they'll meet again. These two guys are going to fight again. You just get that sense.
He nearly beat him in the first round. Why wouldn't they meet again?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, he was undefeated going into this fight. Luke, you've been watching this sport for a very long time. How do you put into the proper historical context what George St-Pierre did tonight? I mean, let's not just talk about MMA. Let's talk about sports. Coming back after 4 years and taking on a new challenge and looking the way he did and winning the way he did. George St-Pierre submitting Michael Bisping in the third round after a 4-year hiatus in a higher weight class. I don't know if we've ever seen this kind of thing in sports. What do you make of it?
Man, he is almost beyond description. He is. You ask yourself, like, is ring rust real? Of course it's real, right? Of course it's real. But the rule is it doesn't affect every fighter in every fight or in every circumstance. It's very fluid. And but the really great ones, like the really, really high level, Mount Rushmore types, for whatever that stupid term is worth, they can take time off and come back and not miss a beat. Floyd Mayweather used to leave it for a year or two at a time, come back and smoke fools, right? And so you have to be that level of the game. And for him to take 4 years off at a time when not merely other stars emerge, but you got to remember best practices technically in MMA, they expand. So look at what TJ was doing. What was TJ doing 4 years ago? He wasn't doing that, right? And so to stay on top of the game, to be able to compete like that, to physically be able to adopt the weight class, he has such self-awareness. He was already ahead of the game. Even if the game moved along, he was still ahead of it tonight. Truly, one of 4 men to only hold a belt in 2 different weight classes in UFC. St-Pierre, if he wasn't the best of all time before tonight, boy, the case just got very, very, very convincing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. He looked very good in the first round. I thought Bisping won the second round. It looked like GSP was slowing down. It looked like he was getting a little tired, and then he figures him out. And let's give GSP credit. He said that he would be more aggressive. He said he would go for the finish. He said he would finish Michael Bisping. He did all that. Interestingly enough, though, Robert Whittaker's sitting in the front row. GSP's asked about the middleweight title and his place in the division by Joe Rogan afterwards. He did not show up to the press conference. He was escorted to transported, I should say, to a local hospital. But he kind of didn't really fully commit to 185. So is this a great moment for the UFC, but also more headaches to come? Or do you think that he will actually stay true to his contract, which he talked about, which states that he must defend that title against Robert Whittaker should he win, which he did?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know if it would be a headache if he didn't do that necessarily. I think that it will probably happen. I think that the UFC's kind of been out of sorts lately, trying to hotshot these big fights, these super fights, these money fights that everyone talks about. And it's been really good for the short-term gain. I don't know how good it's been for long-term gain, because this year, I know Dana White said today that it's the best year in the history.
You don't know anything about MMA, Marc.
I don't look into their books, but I do this for a living, and outside of Mayweather and McGregor, which I'm sure made them a boatload of money, hasn't been the best year in UFC history. Let's just be honest. So I'm not sure what the path is, and as far as GSP is concerned, a fight against Whittaker, for me anyway, and maybe I'm crazy, it lacks a certain panache. You know, it's like his comeback win against Bisping. There was the hype, and Bisping is a great foil, and then it ended up being a great fight. He won the big moment. For me, it would just be kind of weird to kind of see GSP, maybe the best of all time, probably the best of all time, one of the biggest draws of all time, going back and fighting someone who.
Please don't say Connor.
No. I'm saying as far as Whitaker.
No, I know, but is this where this point is going? Are you pushing for this?
You said it, not me. I haven't said a word
Just
about
say
that.
it.
I haven't.
You said it at the press conference. I'm trying to give you an out here.
I'm just saying. I would just think it's weird that seeing GSP go back and kind of just being
what would you do?
another fighter.
What would you do?
I don't know. I got to go back, and I'll get back to you next week with.
Scott Coker, thank you very much. What do you do if you're the UFC?
I mean, GSP doesn't need another nice guy so they can just high five over nice things. He needs a guy who's going to say terrible things and be in his face or simply be disliked. This is real simple. You just do the Tyron Woodley fight. He can defend the title. I mean, who wants GSP to go to Perth? Nobody does. Not even Robert Whitaker was like, sure. You know, nobody wants to see that.
You strip him of the middleweight belt and make Whitaker the real champ, and then
we can figure that out later. Okay. I don't know. You only asked me about the first one. I just feel like Tyron Woodley was. I don't know if you saw. He was chirping at the end of the fight on Twitter. He wants it. I think that would absolutely work. You could do it at 170, which accommodates him, and you can see where you go from there. But to me, that fight for sure makes the most sense.
And the beauty of obviously George returning is this reignites the Canadian market. I mean, you could go to Montreal. You could go to the Rogers Center. You could legit sell 50 to 60,000 tickets with this guy. And how many fighters in the UFC could do that right now? I mean, he still has that aura about him, right? That superstar aura.
You're Canadian. Did this not feel like 2010 to you, 2011 when he was at 129? 1000%. It felt nostalgic and it felt awesome.
Yeah, my friends were texting me. My mom stayed up. She's sick. She stayed up till 1 a.m. to watch. Wow. I mean, they're celebrating. Montreal just celebrated its 375th birthday this year. And then George St-Pierre returns. What a time to be Canadian. Now, let me ask you about Michael Bisping. Okay. Should he have retired in the cage? Should this be it for him? He said at the press conference, I'm not going out getting choked on national television, but it kind of felt like the perfect opportunity to walk away, right?
It really did. I was waiting for it. Joe Rogan spoke to GSP, of course, because he won, and I was like, here it comes. And he said no, and I was like, word? Because Michael Bisping, I can tell you 2 years ago, he used to work at SiriusXM. He was chirping about it back then, being like, I'm pretty much done. And then, of course, everything changed with the Luke Rockhold win, and it just, it set off on its own course. But look, it depends on the matchup. I just want to see him fight someone that cannot do a ton of damage. The guy, I don't normally praise fighters being like, I never tap, because I don't see that as a high fight IQ thing. But in the sense of what Bisping did today, it was absolutely in keeping. This guy is a dog. He is one of the toughest dudes ever to fight in mixed martial arts. Forget the UFC. Legendary mental toughness. I appreciate that from him, but I would like to see him get some kind of fight where I don't have to worry about his consciousness or additional brain trauma,
We could do a whole other post show on the rest of the card. They are kicking us out of here, so I'll ask you guys a final question on the rest of the card. There were some other great performances as well. Paulo Borrachinha, a.k.a. Paulo Costa, a.k.a. The Eraser, just completely annihilated Johnny Hendricks in a fight, once again, that I maintain Johnny Hendricks should have never taken, but a great job by Paulo, great job by the UFC by building a new star. We also had Stephen Wonderboy Thompson defeat Jorge Masvidal, sort of exercising the demons of last year. And how about James Vick at the buzzer at the end of the second round, knocking out Joe Duffy? There were a ton of great performances. Oh, by the way, OSP, in the span of 42 days, it gets an amazing win at the Saitama Super Arena and then comes to the world's most famous arena and knocks out Corey Anderson with an amazing head kick. Any other performance or two that you want to highlight before we say goodnight?
How about the often bashed New York State Athletic Commission?
Oh, wow.
They actually got it right in two very strange, wacky situations. Referee Blake Rice did a really nice job. One of them, they went to the replay, which they just installed this new policy, and in both results they got it right. They were weird situations. It was kind of, not satisfying the way those fights ended. Of course, I'm talking about Walt Harris against Marc Godbeer and Curtis Blades and Alexei Olenek. Not the most satisfying, results of those fights, but the right calls in the end. They got it right.
Only Marc would highlight the commission when I ask him about, but he is right. You're 100% right. With all eyes on them, the spotlight, they actually didn't buckle under the pressure this time and got it right. So yes, kudos to the New York State Athletic Commission. Any highlight or two that you want to mention before we say goodnight?
Tough night for Faraz Zahabi, seeing his brother get viciously KO'd, but then GSP doing what he did. So I know he's probably having some mixed emotions. Just want to sort of acknowledge that. How about Randy Brown?
Yeah.
Beating Mickey Gall. Mickey Gall had a moment there in that second round where he did excellent. He showed you he's a really good natural grappler, but he's so green. Wow, is he green. He just has a lot of work to do. But as you mentioned with Cody, he lost. He's still young, Mickey Gall. I think he can make a lot of progress. I wouldn't read too much into the loss other than to say he's young. He can make up a lot of progress, but he's got a lot of room to grow to be able to compete at this level, which tells you if this guy did that to CM Punk, what is he doing here? Right. Different story for a different time.
Yesterday, Marc, we wondered if the sequel could be better than the maiden voyage. I think it's safe to say, and I'd love to hear anyone who disagrees, that the sequel was in fact better than the maiden voyage. And by the way, there have been now 3 events, MMA events at Madison Square Garden, if you want to include the Bellator event. All 3 have been spectacular in their own right. I mean, all kinds of crazy things happening. And oh, by the way, there have been 6 UFC title fights in this building, and the champion has only successfully defended his title once. Now, we can maybe give Woodley the nod because he got the draw, but like cleanly victory, only 1 out of the 6. That's crazy stuff as well. Magical place, by the way. Hearing as of right now that round 3, the 3rd trip to MSG, is scheduled for November of 2018. So this is going to be a yearly thing for the company. And thus far, the first 2 events, any indication, it has been a very successful venture for them. And oh, by the way, $6+ million gate, so it's the 3rd all-time here in this building. 18,000 plus fans in attendance, including the unicorn Kristaps Porzingis. So all the talk about this not being a great night as far as business is concerned, well, George St-Pierre, Michael Bisping, and the rest of the crew did pretty damn good business for the UFC. Once again, George St-Pierre is the new UFC middleweight champion. Holy smokes, who predicted that just a year or so ago? Cody Garbrandt, no longer the bantamweight champion. It's TJ Dillashaw now, and Rose Namajunas, Thug Rose Namajunas, is the new UFC strawweight champion. Wow, what a night here in New York City. We'll say goodnight. We appreciate you watching our coverage all week long from the Big Apple. For Marc, Luke, Esther, Casey, the rest of our crew, thank you so much once again for watching. We'll see you Monday for the MMA Hour.